Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Counting the cost of a catastrophe. 5 dead in wildfires around Los Angeles as Hollywood faces real-life horror. The insurance bill runs to billions.
Our other headlines, Slovakia's Prime Minister accuses Ukraine's President Zelensky of sabotaging his country by cutting off Russian gas.
The pound takes a pounding. Concerns over the UK economy as the currency falls to its lowest level in 14 months and borrowing costs soar.
And friends, family and dignitaries pay their respects as former US President Jimmy Carter's funeral takes place in Washington.
We begin in Los Angeles, where wildfires are raging out of control across different parts of the city. The latest burning through the Hollywood Hills. It's threatening Tinseltown's iconic landmarks like the Hollywood sign and the Walk of Fame, while officials say nearby buildings along Sunset Boulevard have been destroyed.
Hundreds of homes have been reduced to rubble, with more than 130,000 people told to leave. 5 people have now been confirmed dead. The emergency crews are struggling to contain the fires, and authorities say high winds are fanning the flames.
This firestorm is the big one in magnitude. Hurricane-force winds are usually accompanied by rainstorms, but these are hurricane-force winds that are combined with extremely dry drought conditions. To provide context, at 10:20 a.m. yesterday, the Palisades fire was at 10 acres. 12 minutes later, it was at 200 acres.
Well, our correspondent, Ira Spitzer, is in Los Angeles. So, Ira, give us an update on the battle to control these fires.
Well, we've heard city officials and state officials use the word unprecedented to describe what is happening here in Los Angeles, and that is absolutely the case. You can see behind me, that is the Palisades fire that we just heard the fire chief talking about. As far as the latest update, that fire is 0% contained, as well as the Eaton fire, another major fire burning to the east, also with 0% containment. We're expecting an update extremely shortly from city officials, so perhaps they've made some progress, but it's very difficult, of course, to make any sort of a dent in containing these fires because of these winds, which continue. We've seen them dip slightly towards the end of yesterday, but there is a red flag warning in effect for this area through Friday. Those winds continue to pose a major danger, carrying embers as far as miles away, and then those embers can spark new fires. So, the firefighters are using major resources to try and work on the fires that are ongoing. Any new fire would pose significant challenges. You mentioned that Hollywood fire, the Sunset fire. They have made progress containing that and lifted an evacuation order for much of the Hollywood neighborhoods. Some of those residents are able to return home, but across this city, just devastation. People don't know if they're going to have a home to return to. The number of structures damaged is at least 2,000, but that number is expected to grow significantly as the extent of the damage becomes clear.
Obviously, extremely challenging conditions. We can actually hear those strong winds as you talk to us, but is there any relief in sight?
Well, the hope is that firefighters will be able to use the decreased wind speed, even though this is still considered a Santa Ana wind event, which is these deadly winds that can blow at high speeds and dry temperatures down from the mountains towards the coast. Even though this is still a Santa Ana wind event, we have seen some reduction in wind speeds. That's allowed authorities to begin flying aircraft again, which is a key part of monitoring and fighting these fires. So the hope here is that the worst is behind this city. However, again, with the possibility of new fires starting and with all those resources going towards just trying to contain these very serious fires, the city really is still on edge, and we're starting to hear lots of stories from almost everyone you run into here knows somebody who has been seriously affected by these fires. Certainly evacuations are happening all over the city, and they can coming at any time. The Hollywood evacuation came with very little notice just last night. So people really concerned, of course, about friends and family and their own homes if they don't know what they have to go back to.
Ira, thank you very much. Our correspondent Ira Spitzer in Los Angeles.
Well, other parts of the United States also face extreme weather of a different kind. Temperatures have plunged below zero in parts of the east and across southern states as another winter storm blows in.
Our correspondent Nitza Soledad Perez reports.
Nationally, cold weather and freeze alerts stretch from New Mexico in the west to Florida as Arctic air grips the eastern United States. This system follows last week's major winter storm that left several people dead, over 200,000 without power, and disrupted more than 9,000 flights. The nation's capital, Washington, D.C., recorded 18 centimeters of snow, making it the city's biggest snowstorm since 2019. Looking ahead, meteorologists warn of another approaching winter storm, bringing a mix of snow, sleet, and freezing rain to the south, and possibly into the mid-Atlantic. A brutal cold is expected to blanket much of the country, putting power grids and emergency services under severe strain. The situation has sparked concern, reminding some of the devastating winter storm that hit Texas in 2021. That storm left millions without power for days, and scores of deaths were blamed on the state's failed power grid.
Right now, we are making sure that our trucks are ready to go, our crews are ready to go, and also putting down an early application of brine on some of our major interstates and highways. And that's going to help us, if all goes as expected, give us a little bit of an advantage of the ice, preventing it from sticking to the roadway initially. So that will help our crews get in there, start breaking up any of the accumulations and clearing roadways.
While here in Florida, the atypical cold temperatures are expected to continue for the next 10 days or more. Nitza Soledad Perez, GTN, Miami.
Well, as these wildfires sweep through some of America's most exclusive neighborhoods, attention is already turning to the cost of this disaster. The commercial weather forecaster AccuWeather estimates losses so far of around $52 billion, but warned that's likely to rise. The world's largest reinsurance group says hurricanes, fires and other disasters caused a total of $320 billion of losses in 2024. That's around a third higher than the previous year.
Well, let's talk now to Stefan Doer, who's a professor of wildfire science at Swansea University. Good to see you, Stefan. Welcome to the programme. So clearly these fires are still not under control, lots of damage there. But how damaging could they be economically and for insurers?
Well, of course, because a lot of properties have already been destroyed. These are very high-value properties. Chances are this may well turn into the most expensive wildfire disaster, at least for insured losses, in Californian history and likely also in U.S. history. The verdict is still out, for example, how much exactly the Maui fire in Hawaii actually cost. But it's very probable that these fires exceed those costs.
And why have these particular ones been so bad?
It's been a combination of a number of factors. One is the very strong Santa Ana winds, which are not unusual this time of the year. But what is unusual is that we've had the summer drought extend well into winter, so we haven't had any significant winter precipitation, and that meant that the vegetation is tinder dry. All it takes is a single ignition and you have one big fire. We now have 5 fires in the area. They are extremely challenging to suppress. So hopefully with the change in wind that we're expecting in this area, there will be some progress.
Looking at figures from last year, there was a big rise in the cost of losses from various natural disasters. Are they really getting worse or more frequent?
Absolutely. I mean, as far as fires are concerned, what we're seeing, and that's well demonstrated through studies, is that the fires are globally becoming more extreme. It doesn't necessarily mean that the fires are bigger everywhere, but certainly when it comes to the United States and also Canada, fire size, fire intensity, and fire frequency are all on the rise. And this, of course, brings with it a much greater damage. The other part of the equation is that we have more and more properties, infrastructures in areas that are prone to wildfire, and Malibu is a key example here. If you bring this together with more extreme fire behavior, of course, the costs are going through the roof.
So let's talk about North America and Canada that you mentioned there. Why are those areas so vulnerable to natural disasters?
Yeah, again, when it comes to fire in particular, North America, especially Western North America, has an almost unique combination of very dense vegetation and also very flammable vegetation and ignition. Many fires are caused by lightning, especially in Canada, for example, but also many fires are caused by humans. Most fires actually are caused by humans. And because many of the areas are densely populated, the possibility of an ignition, whether that is directly by, say, a campfire, by a discarded cigarette, by an electrical fault, or anything else, if you increase population density, you will increase the risk of fire. So, and bring onto this the increased occurrence of drought, that basically means that we are likely to have many fires into the future in the United States, especially in the West Coast. What we've also been seeing across the world, but especially in the Western United States, is that the fire season, so the conditions under which fires are likely to occur, has lengthened. Globally, it lengthened for about 27% since 2018. Since 2008, yes. And that means that the probability of a fire occurring at any time of the year has increased. And of course, in California, the situation is even worse. The fire weather season has lengthened even more, and that means greater probability of fire.
I mean, we are talking about some areas which are just becoming uninsurable, aren't they, because of the high risk of living there. What does that mean for all of us, for our premiums?
I think it means two things. Ultimately, it's all about business. So if you can cover the costs, it may well be insurable, but for many people, it has become uninsurable. This is the case for many natural disasters, whether it is in floodplains, whether it is in fire-affected areas. But there is also, I think, there's some small positive twist in there. The insurers have a role to play in actually lowering the premiums when house owners, basically property owners, actually do everything they can to reduce the fire risk. And there's a lot of things that people can do.
Professor, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme. That's Professor Stefan Doer from Swansea University.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, concerns over the UK economy as the pound falls to its lowest level in 14 months.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Slovakia's Prime Minister is in Brussels after he accused Ukraine's President Zelensky of sabotaging his country by cutting off Russian gas. Robert Fico has threatened to turn off electricity flows to Ukraine and reduce aid for its refugees after Kyiv stopped shipping gas from Russia into Europe at the start of the year. He wants $1.5 billion in compensation, the amount he says the shutdown will cost Slovakia, and claims the EU's 27 members will take a collective hit of more than $72 billion. Since the conflict in Ukraine began nearly 3 years ago, the European Union has significantly cut its dependence on Russian gas. But before Ukraine turned off the taps, the gas continued to flow, generating revenues for Moscow of an estimated $5.2 billion a year. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Will Denslow, who's in Brussels. So, Will, what came out of Fico's talks in Brussels?
Well, we've had a readout released after these conversations held between Dan Jorgensen, the energy chief at the European Commission, and the Slovak Prime Minister. And the readout said that it was a good and open discussion. However, after those bilateral talks, Robert Fico held a press conference in which he said that unless Ukraine reverses its decision and reopens the taps of Russian gas travelling through the country to Slovakia and other parts of Europe, he says that Kyiv would face harsh reciprocal measures. So very strong language used by Robert Fico here in Brussels. This, of course, comes as Robert Fico also warns that the country is hurt to the tune of over $500 million. He says that might not seem much, but he says for a country like Slovakia, it certainly is. According to some estimates, the reason why Slovakia is really the forefront of this spat between with Ukraine is the fact that, according to some analysts, Hungary as well as Slovakia, according to 2023 figures, around 65% of its gas came through that pipeline from Russia through Ukraine to their countries. Now, the EU says that political and technical talks will continue. They also say that they are establishing a high-level working group to try and see how the EU can help in this debate, this spat between Ukraine and Slovakia.
So, Will, the Kremlin says it's ready to resume gas shipments to Europe, but does Europe want or need it?
Well, according to the European Commission, say just this week that they are confident there is no shortage, no energy shortage. They say that there's been no major surge in prices. Significant to note, though, that when Ukraine came good on their long-anticipated promise of cutting off the taps, there was a spike in prices to the tune of around 4%. That drove prices up to the highest level we've seen since October 2023. Now, as you rightly mentioned, the EU has a long-standing policy we've seen since 2022, since the escalation in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, to cut off all imports of Russian fossil fuels by 2027. However, just last year, we saw the import of liquefied natural gas shipments coming into the EU rising to the highest levels seen. So a significant moment there. But of course, there's also a political dimension to be concerned. The EU certainly wants to see the bloc with a united front in support for Kyiv going forward. So certainly frosty relations between Slovakia and Kyiv will not be welcomed here in Brussels.
Will, thanks very much. Our correspondent William Denslow in Brussels.
The British pound has fallen to a 14-month low against the dollar after a big sell-off on bond markets. It sent UK borrowing costs soaring to their highest level since the global financial crisis of 2008. Officials say the markets are functioning in an orderly fashion and there's no need for any emergency intervention. But economists have warned that Finance Minister Rachel Reeves could be forced into new tax increases or spending cuts. Let's talk to Jane Foley, Head of Foreign Exchange Strategy at Rabobank. Jane, good to see you. UK Finance Minister Rachel Reeves being told to stop her imminent flight to China, stay at home in the UK, steady the ship. Her political opponents, of course, would say that, wouldn't they? But how serious is this?
Well, we do have signs that the gilt market and the sterling have settled down today in the European session, but there's no doubt that both assets, the gilts market and the UK sterling, do remain really quite vulnerable. And I think what we've been seeing in a very rapid way yesterday, but I think really over the last few weeks is a repricing of these assets towards a new reality really for the UK. So if you go back, for instance, to the first half of last year, growth for the UK in the first 2 quarters of last year was coming in much better than expected. There was optimism about the post-election government in the UK. We had the manifesto that was promising us from the Labour Party that we would see higher growth and that we would see more investment. And instead, actually, we saw a downward revision before the end of last year of Q3 GDP, which saw no growth in that quarter. So a much more pessimistic outlook has been forming really for the UK economy. Some commentators talking about stagnation, even stagflation. And it's against that background that the market realises that the budget, or the Chancellor's budget, has very little wiggle room, and that might mean more taxes, which could slow growth even more. So the market's adjusting really to a nastier reality for the UK than the one perhaps they had been hoping for, say, in the middle of last year.
The government insisting it will not borrow more to fund day-to-day spending. Really? Is that realistic? Are they going to be able to stick to that?
Well, there's certainly pressure for the government to really clarify this position. Now, I think one thing that is important for the credibility of the government is that it sticks to its own fiscal rules. However, if it does stick to those fiscal rules, well, that probably does mean a good chance that we'll either see more austerity being announced or more tax rises. Again, neither of those are going to do anything to help the growth outlook, which is already faltering. So there is no easy way out of this situation, and that's the reality that the asset prices are adjusting to right now.
Some economists, old people like me, are comparing what's happening now to 1976, when the pound fell so far. The UK had to get a bailout from the International Monetary Fund. Are we there yet, or is that still a long way away?
We're not there yet, but, you know, that doesn't mean to say that debt isn't an issue for the UK. I mean, it certainly is. The debt as a percentage of GDP in the UK is just below 100%. It's about 95.5%. Now, to give that some perspective, if we go back to the global financial crisis, just before the global financial crisis, it was around 50%, around that sort of mark. So we more or less doubled it in a relatively short space of time. Various reasons for that, of course, and many other countries in a similar boat post-COVID as well. So this isn't just a problem that the UK is finding. Now, we do have more credibility in the government. We do have a tighter labour market. There's lots to be said in terms of how far the UK economy has come relative to the 1970s. But that doesn't mean to say we don't have our problems. And certainly it does look likely that for many of us we'll be facing a pretty heavy tax burden in the next few years as the government hopefully makes structural reforms to put investment high up in the agenda and more growth and wealth and prosperity over the longer term.
Jane, thank you for that. Jane Foley, Head of Foreign Exchange Strategy at Rabobank.
China's central bank plans to issue a record $8 billion worth of bills in its yuan currency in Hong Kong next week. Officials say it's aimed at enriching yuan investment products with high credit ratings and improving the currency's yields in Hong Kong. The yuan hit a 16-month low against the dollar on Wednesday. Inflation in China fell to 0.1% in December, reviving fears of deflation when the rate turns negative. Food prices actually fell compared to November by an average of 0.5%, with the cost of vegetables and meat tumbling even more. Prolonged ultra-low inflation in China reflects a continued slump in consumer demand as people hold back on spending because of concerns over the economy. China says the European Union has created trade and investment barriers after a 6-month investigation into EU policies targeting Chinese firms. Beijing says the implementation of the EU's foreign subsidies regulation discriminates against Chinese businesses. China's Commerce Ministry launched the inquiry after the EU began its own investigation into Chinese government subsidies.
A second strike has been averted at 36 ports on the east and Gulf coasts of the United States. Unions representing thousands of dock workers said they'd reached a deal with employers on a new 6-year contract. A 3-day strike in October led to a surge in shipping costs and reportedly cost the economy millions of dollars. British retailers are reporting strong Christmas sales. Marks & Spencer saw sales rise by 9%, enjoying its biggest ever day of food trading on the 23rd of December. The UK's largest supermarket chain, Tesco, recorded its best Christmas, landing its largest share of the festive shopping trolley since 2016.
The United States' total credit card debt was more than $1 trillion last year. That's around $6,000 per household. It's the highest in the world and more than double that of second place Japan. But despite that, many Americans are feeling cheerful about their own household bills. Our correspondent Karina Mitchell reports.
A recent survey from personal finance firm Bankrate shows more Americans are feeling optimistic about their personal finances.
I think they'll be better, yeah.
Big time optimistic.
Why?
Because I'm moving to a state with no state income tax.
In fact, 44% of those surveyed believe they'll see an improvement. That's an increase of 7% compared to last year. What's driving that positive outlook? One financial analyst believes the answer is simple.
The fact that inflation's come down has been a bright spot.
According to the survey, there are several ways American consumers intend to take matters into their own hands. Topping the list, 21% say they intend to pay down debt. 12% said they plan to save more for emergencies, while just over 1 in 10 plan to get a better-paying job or find additional sources of income. 16% said they don't know what their top financial goal is for this year, or they don't have one. Almost half of all Americans carry monthly credit card debt, according to another just-released survey from Bankrate. Of those, just over half have been in debt for at least 1 year. While the good news is those figures are down slightly from last year, Ted Rossman stresses the need for Americans to prioritize paying down debt.
The average credit card charges over 20%. And that's probably 3, 4, 5 times higher than what most people are paying on mortgages, car loans, student loans.
He says one smart tip is to transfer high-cost credit card debt to a 0% balance transfer card that could be interest-free for up to 21 months. If that's not an option, Rossman notes nonprofit credit counseling to reduce your debt load may be the next best thing.
They can negotiate something like a 7 or 8% rate over 4 or 5 years. The good news, too, is that this is very widely available.
At the same time, he advises not to neglect saving for a rainy day and cutting expenses to maximize financial returns, stressing small adjustments now can produce big returns by the end of the year. Karina Mitchell, CGTN, New York.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, travels across Africa. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says he wants to deliver stronger partnerships with Nigeria.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories: 5 dead in wildfires around Los Angeles as Hollywood faces real-life horror. The insurance bill runs to billions. Our other headlines: Slovakia's Prime Minister accuses Ukraine's President Zelensky of sabotaging his country by cutting off Russian gas. And concerns over the UK economy as the pound falls to its lowest level in 14 months and borrowing costs soar.
The state funeral for United States President Jimmy Carter is well underway in Washington. Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther is just outside the cathedral. So, Philip, America pausing in what is an otherwise very, very heated time in US politics to pay tribute to President Carter.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a national day of mourning here in the United States. It has been a week of official mourning. Today brings to an end 6 days of national rights that began in the town of Plains in Georgia, where Jimmy Carter was from and where he will be buried later today. After these proceedings, after this service happening right now inside the National Cathedral here in the U.S. Capitol comes to an end. We are right now awaiting the eulogy from U.S. President Joe Biden. We have already heard from the sons of Walter Mondale. He was Jimmy Carter's vice president between 1977 and 1981, Jimmy Carter's time in the White House. We've also heard from the son of Gerald Ford. He was Jimmy Carter's predecessor in the White House and a competitor for the White House in the end. Now, what those two gentlemen did here was read letters that were written by their fathers to be read out in the case they died before Jimmy Carter. He, of course, outlived many people, living to the age of 100 years, dying at the end of the year, of course. We also heard here from one of the main advisors to Jimmy Carter in the White House. From him, more of a defense of Carter's time in the White House. It is often said that he was not a good president, or a failed president at least, and somebody who, of course, lost in a landslide to Ronald Reagan to keep him from having 2 mandates in the White House. But that was a defense of his time in his administration, of succeeding more than people give him credit for in creating peace between Egypt and Israel, for example. On the domestic front, creating the Department of Education, the Department of Energy as well, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, that will be called upon in the likes of LA, of course, with those wildfires happening right now. Of course, a very positive portrait being painted of Jimmy Carter during his presidency, but more than anything thereafter. He had a very long post-presidency, after all, during which he became a humanitarian, somebody who stepped in to defend democracy and human rights around the world. He received a Nobel Peace Prize, after all. So today here, it all comes to an end, these 6 days of national mourning, of national rights. Jimmy Carter's coffin that is draped in the American flag will be brought outside here again from the National Cathedral. Once this service is over, it will then be flown back to his home state of Georgia and his hometown of Plains, where he will be married next to Rosalind Carter, his wife of 77 years, who died in November of 2023.
Philip, thank you very much. Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther in Washington.
The United States has no current plans to increase its military presence in Greenland. That's according to the U.S. Embassy in Denmark. Greenland is a semi-autonomous part of Denmark. President-elect Donald Trump said earlier this week that he wanted America to take over the Arctic island. A little later in the programme, we're going to take you to Copenhagen, we hope, and talk to our correspondent there, Yolo Ap David. In the meantime, we'll carry on with the rest of today's news.
Rescue teams in China's Xizang region are widening their search for survivors 2 days after an earthquake left at least 126 people dead.
More than 47,000 people have already been moved to temporary shelters. Our correspondent Jung Song-woo reports.
Changsuo Township was one of the 3 most affected areas by the earthquake. Tonglai Village, which is in a township, has a population of nearly 500. Some houses here completely collapsed, while others were severely damaged, and 9 people lost their lives in this community.
We knew how severe the situation was because people's houses collapsed. There was dust everywhere. We helped the trapped people out of the debris and worked with the township government. We arranged ambulances to send those injured to receive medical treatment.
The township government sent relief supplies, including tents, quilts, stoves, and warm clothing to affected areas. Rescue workers also helped to build temporary shelters.
Temporary shelters are important for locals after earthquake, and these rescue workers have been helping villagers for 2 days since the earthquake struck the village, and so far they've built more than 90 temporary shelters for locals.
Pasan Droma lived alone in Tonglai village. She was in another county when the earthquake struck her hometown.
I am disabled. It's difficult for me to walk because of my legs. My house collapsed because of the earthquake. I am heartbroken. But these rescue workers have helped me a lot, building a tent for me. I am so grateful.
More than 12,000 people, including firefighters, military forces, and policemen, have carried out the rescue operations.
We've been unloading the relief materials since this morning. So far, we have unloaded 35 tons worth of supplies. In the afternoon, we helped build the tents. There are 26 tents in this area, sheltering 260 people. We'll also monitor aftershocks this evening.
As of Wednesday, 187 resettlement sites have been set up, accommodating almost 47,000 people. 赠送 CGTN 第日 County, Xizang Autonomous Region.
The United States has no current plans to increase its military presence in Greenland, according to the U.S. Embassy in Denmark. Greenland is a semi-autonomous part of Denmark. President-elect Trump said he wanted America to take over the Arctic island. Let's talk to our correspondent Yolo Ap David in Copenhagen. Yolo, Greenland and Denmark's authority over the island is being questioned as never before.
Yes, in a way, but if you remember, Jamie, Donald Trump, the last time he was president, made similar suggestions. It certainly sparked, I think, an uncomfortable debate and discussions here, especially in Denmark. And Donald Trump's language this time round, earlier this week, is certainly blunt, and it's seen by some as being threatening as well, not just towards Greenland, but also the Panama Canal in Central America. Now, why now? Well, he is back in the White House as president in 11 days' time. And there is also the security of North America, and that's why the strategic position in the Arctic region of Greenland, the natural resources there, the untapped natural resources, which would interest many, many companies, including, of course, the Greenlandic Parliament. And then there is this ability of Donald Trump trying to utilize some tough language in a very uncertain world. But it's definitely caused a bit of a stir. We've had politicians here running away from the microphone rather than appearing in front of them.
Greenland is the world's largest island that's home to a small population. It's an autonomous region of Denmark that could vote for independence one day. Closer to New York than Copenhagen, it's now coveted by the next US president. But there isn't a crisis so far.
This is the way he does international relations. Sometimes he's just joking, sometimes it's bravado, sometimes it's threats. And the only real danger is if he begins doing some of the stuff he's talking about.
In an extraordinary news conference earlier this week, Donald Trump said he wanted control of Greenland and the Panama Canal. He said he wouldn't rule out military action or economic tariffs.
People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security.
The response in Denmark has been a mix of anger and disbelief. His comments jogged a few memories as Trump had just repeated what he said in 2019, that he wanted to buy Greenland.
It's the people of Greenland that should decide what to do, and we cannot just sell Greenland.
Trump is Trump, so I don't know what to say. But no, it's part of Denmark. It's always been.
Greenland, if they want to, they have every right to it. But I like this collaboration between Greenland and Denmark, so I think we should continue it.
Both social and traditional media have been buzzing after Trump's comments debating whether it really is US security that's at stake or Greenland's untapped wealth in terms of oil and minerals.
As well as uranium, Greenland has an estimated 43 of the 50 minerals deemed critical by the US government, not just for military hardware, but also for renewable energy equipment. And according to an American 2008 survey, an estimated 52 billion barrels of oil.
Donald Trump Jr., the US president-elect's son, visited the island on Tuesday. For some sightseeing, he said. As he met locals, his father called.
Well, you go have a good time, everybody, and we're going to treat you well.
That kind of message is well received. While many are comfortable with his relationship with Denmark and the more than $500 million that's paid annually to the local government, some attitudes are changing.
For me, Denmark doesn't matter much to me. It's just a small country. We can't use them any longer because there's so many great powers in the world. So our partner should be a great power because Greenland is very wealthy. We have everything.
Just like people here, Greenlanders are Danish citizens and members of the European Union. Away from Denmark, it's not clear yet how much the geopolitics of the Arctic or the potential wealth from drilling and mining could galvanize the next American administration in its quest for Greenland.
And Antony Blinken, the current Secretary of State for another week and a half, doesn't think that this is a goer. He said it's not a good suggestion, and it's one he says he doesn't think will happen. And yet, all the political parties in Denmark are meeting in the parliament this evening because they are so worried about offending what is seen as a most important military and economic ally, the United States. And of course, we're a week and a half away from Donald Trump returning as president.
Yolo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Yolo Abdavid in Copenhagen.
Health officials in Gaza say Israeli attacks during the past 24 hours have killed at least 70 Palestinians and injured more than 100. Authorities are warning Gaza's Al-Aqsa, Nasser and European hospitals are facing imminent shutdown because of fuel shortages, with the lives of several premature babies said to be at high risk. Mediators from the United States, Egypt and Qatar say some progress has been made in ceasefire talks.
Lebanon's parliament has elected military chief Joseph Aoun as president after 12 failed attempts over 2 years left the country without a head of state. An army general who enjoys Washington's support, Aoun, secured a parliamentary majority after lawmakers from Hezbollah and its Shiite ally, the Amal movement, backed him in the second round of voting.
At least 6 people have been killed in a stampede near one of India's busiest temples in the state of Andhra Pradesh. 35 people were injured as thousands of Hindu worshippers gathered to collect free passes. The temple's operator has apologised and promised to take action against anyone found responsible.
85 people have been rescued near the Canary Islands. They're reported to be migrants travelling from sub-Saharan Africa. They were taken to the island of Gran Canaria. The number of migrant boats heading to the Spanish islands has risen over the last year, with arrivals hitting an all-time high.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is in Nigeria for talks expected to focus on trade, infrastructure and technology. He's been meeting his Nigerian counterpart, Yusuf Tugar, as well as President Bola Tinubu.
Wang says they're working to deliver on agreements reached at a summit in Beijing in September. Our correspondent Ajek Mangut is in Abuja.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi's stop to Nigeria is the last of his 4-nation tour of Africa. He visited Namibia, Republic of Congo and Chad and then Nigeria. And part of the meetings he had earlier today with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tugar, and President Bola Tinubu was to reaffirm China's commitment to Africa and also Nigeria in the areas of trade, infrastructure, energy, peace and security. Foreign Minister Wang Yi expressed that China will continue to support Africa in ensuring that there's peace and development in the country in the area of infrastructure. And he said that China is going to support Africa in terms of providing financial support up to $130 million, providing military assistance to Africa, and also in terms of training military personnel in ensuring that the Africa continent is secure. Is also to implement some of the agreements that were reached during the FOCAC meeting in Beijing last year. And so these are some of the issues that were discussed when Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Nigeria and met with Nigerian officials. And already he said that we're already going to be seeing results with the release of over $250 million to Nigeria to carry out the construction of railway. There's also been the renewal of the $2 billion currency swap agreement. And so the focus really was to strengthen the bilateral ties that China has with Nigeria and other African countries to ensure that they strengthen ties in the area of trade, increasing or boosting trade volumes with various African countries, and to ensure the prosperity of the peoples of Africa and also that of China.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, flying taxis and talking furniture. The latest from the world's largest consumer electronics fair.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. What's it like to live in space? China's Shenzhou 18 crew have been sharing their experiences at the China Astronaut Research and Training Center in Beijing.
The three stayed in China's space station between April and November last year. It's the first time they've spoken to the media since coming back to Earth. Our correspondent Zhang Yibing reports.
Here they come, the Shenzhou 18 crew, to share what they have experienced in space and back home. It was the second time for Commander Ye Guangfu to conduct the space mission, changing from the crew member aboard the Shenzhou 13 mission to the commander of the Shenzhou 18 mission. He also set a record among Chinese taikonauts after staying in space for more than a year and stressed the importance of teamwork.
During the mission, we were united with the personnel on the ground, and all crew members aboard the space station were perfectly coordinated. It was just because of this that we smoothly and happily completed a half-a-year space mission, and also jointly created a wonderful and unforgettable flying journey.
Li Cong said he's happy that all the wish lists he made before the mission were achieved. He also said he was impressed when meeting others playing an important role in China's space program.
The Shenzhou 17 crew passed me the baton in space, as well as their responsibility and expectations. And the meeting with the Shenzhou 19 crew urged me to find a quick way to help them adapt to life in space. Both experiences felt so great.
Li Guangfu expressed pride when recalling the dozens of space experiments they managed to successfully complete.
What impressed me most was the zebrafish experiment on China's space station. We value the zebrafish not only because they are important for the mission, but also our hopes in space. The way they adapted to space is just like what we did. We hope there could be more experiments and more results to benefit all humans.
Now the Shenzhou 18 crew is in the recovery and observation stage. They are currently in a good physical and mental condition. And after the health assessment, they will undergo normal training for future missions.
Just like what Commander Ye Guangfu said, every mission is completely new. And no matter how many times they have undertaken a mission to space, they will always join hands with everyone to achieve the goals. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
The head of the European Space Agency has called for more ambition and more spending on big space projects.
Joseph Aschbacher was setting out the agency's goals for the coming year as it marks its 50th anniversary. Our correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
2025 will be a big year for the European Space Agency as it celebrates 50 years since its founding. The Director General kicked off the year with his annual news conference, outlining the agency's key priorities for the year ahead. He said he wanted to see a transformation in commercial growth during 2025, with increased private sector partnerships and more overall action from Europe. The ESA budget for this year was confirmed on Thursday at $7.9 billion, still only a third of the size of NASA's budget.
Where we have to catch up is in terms of funding allocated to space, because it's very simple. If you don't have money for projects, you cannot launch large projects and therefore not develop. And space will become more and more important, both economically, strategically, for security, for many, many domains.
2025 will see more launches of the Ariane 6 rocket, more satellites being sent into space, and continued work on planning the first crewed mission with an astronaut with a disability. There will also be a further commitment towards decarbonisation, with the European Space Agency continuing plans to develop reusable spacecraft and help responses to natural disasters.
We have satellites that can look through clouds, can provide an image in case of a flooding and be available. What we do not yet have is a fully operational system. We have the capacity, we have several satellites who can do, I would say, interesting things and a lot of things, but not yet in a fully operational way. In other words, if there is a fire happening, you want an image within 20 minutes. And today we have to be lucky to have a satellite that flies over the area at that time, and then of course you can get the data very quick. But the frequency of observations, that the number of satellites, is not yet at the level.
The global space economy is worth some $500 billion, and that's set to increase to more than $1.5 trillion in the next decade. evidence, according to Josef Aschbacher, that despite challenging economic conditions, there remains major appetite for investment in and exploration of space. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
It's the world's largest consumer electronics fair. Chinese companies are showing their wares in Las Vegas.
They include an infrared hairdryer and AI furniture that moves and talks. Our correspondent Mark New reports.
Inside the Las Vegas Sphere, the airline Delta embarks on a futuristic product launch. On a simulated runway, CEO Ed Bastian announces an AI-powered chatbot in its concierge app that will aim to help travelers stay on schedule.
A Gen AI-powered personal assistant that anticipates your needs, provides real-time guidance, and delivers tailored recommendations.
I'll be ready to leave soon.
Traffic to the airport is heavy. Time by car is 90 minutes. Would you like to request a Joby flight?
Joby is an electric air taxi service that has partnered with Delta with the aim of transforming travel in the near future.
Eve is running tight on time, so taking a car is not going to be an option. Guess what? Delta Concierge is already working on an alternate solution, a Joby, a new breed of electric vehicle vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which can get her to the airport in a short fraction of the time.
At CES, creating efficiencies in daily life is also the focus of numerous Chinese companies here like Lifan, which demonstrates the power of its high-tech hairdryer that can blow-dry this woman's hair in just a few minutes. Chinese company Yarbo shows off its autonomous snowblower that can help clear a driveway without the owner lifting a finger.
And at CES, you'll find you're surrounded by robots at every corner, even when you least suspect it. Like, what is that? That's actually Mimo, an AI robot that thinks, acts, and adapts.
We want the user to have this robot inside a house and are proud of it. So we made this kind of design.
So you want it to be sitting there like it's a piece of furniture.
Yeah, like expensive, rich furniture.
Mimo has AI built into the device so that the moving piece of furniture can even talk. Other startups are also using AI in different ways to drive efficiency. Garden is a complete indoor hydroponic garden where the gardeners hardly have to do anything to make sure their crop grows.
You just select what you want to grow and the system grows it for you. The system actually has cameras. The system actually sees the plants that are growing on your garden and is going to be able to detect what kind of plants it is, how fast they are growing, and this way it's going to optimize the growth of your plants for you.
While the AI-driven system can certainly help people with a busy lifestyle, Ruxel hopes his tech will go beyond that, helping communities around the world become more efficient in the way they grow healthy food. Mark New, CGTN, Las Vegas.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.